National Security Advisor, retired Major General Babagana Monguno, over the weekend found himself trying to explain remarks he made during an interview, which were widely interpreted to be an indictment on retired service chiefs regarding the purchase and delivery of arms meant for the war on terror. That brought back memories of what government officials like to call the Dasuki arms deal, in reference to alleged mismanagement of funds meant for the Boko Haram war in the early days of the insurgency. Heads have rolled over that controversy, and up to the moment, the government of the day continues to hold the one before it to account for it. However, there's been a lingering suspicion in some quarters that the war effort lacks transparency over the expenditure of funds voted for and actual delivery of military hardware from foreign contractors. Joining us now to look at this matter is Lemmy Ughegbe, human rights advocate, media critic, public opinion influencer, development communication consultant, and child and gender rights advocate, who also talk about perceived inequity in the appointment and distribution of appeal court justices in Nigeria. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, good morning, Lemmy. But very quickly, is it possible for the National Security Advisor not to know exactly what he said and, for him to be quoted out of context? That's one issue. But generally, what's your impression about how, the government is tackling the challenge of security, even after the appointment of new service chiefs? And now that 6 states in the northern part of the country have had to shut down schools out of fear, if you like, or do they insist the schools have been shut down to allow the state governments to work on the security challenge with boarding schools in particular?
Okay, let's start with the fact that I am well documented on public space to have consistently spoken about the lack of transparency, the lack of accountability in the war against the insurgents. You would find that in the last 2 years before Buratai and his counterparts in the Air Force and Navy were relieved or allowed to leave their post as as service chiefs, you would find that about 289 billion naira had been spent in the last 2 years before they left office, and had consistently said that with the level of complaints of our security forces, our soldiers in the theater of war, where we see even generals, commanders take to even social media to complain about how badly equipped they are. I always said that there was a need for an audit by the President and Commander-in-Chief and senior members of the security services to audit how much has been expended and how much of those ammunitions that they earmarked money for had been gotten. Because again, when soldiers, remember recently we heard of how many hundreds of them who had absconded. And when you are able to see on social media several reactions, you will find that a lot of them are afraid for their lives, because if you compare what the insurgents are using to fight them, to cause mayhem, you would find that it's as if our soldiers are allowed to use catapults to withstand the superior firepower of the insurgents. So really, there is no transparency, there is no accountability. And instead of the commander-in-chief to actually call these service chiefs to order, what he chose to do was to reward people that Nigerians in their numbers had said, look, these people are more or less making merry with the situation in the country. And Mongunu coming out recently to even say about $1 billion was missing or unaccounted for and all, lends credence, actually consolidates on our concern that it appears some people are smiling to the bank. Yes, we know that he had attempted a damage control. But like we always say, when the police release an investigation report, which is called FIR, First Investigation Report, it is usually almost always the impeccably conducted exercise, and the reports are almost impeccable. But when they do what they call a complementary or a second report, that is usually when politics comes in. The Mongunu spoke true to what he discovered, but as it were, it's part of the problem of trying to paper the crack when he noticed that, well, this is one government, I am part of the government, and I had spoken like this, there will be so much trouble. He decided to do a damage control. But whichever way we look at it, it is clear that there is a problem of lack of transparency, there's a problem of lack of accountability, and you can see that even the former Chief of Army Staff, Buratai, when he went for ambassadorial screening, what did he say? Somebody who had made so much money came out and said, in the next 20 years, Nigeria would not be done.
Lemmy, we need to take a short break. When we return, the conversation will continue. Let's take this commercial break. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Still with us is Lemmy Ughegbe, human rights advocate, media critic, and development communication consultant. Lemmy, sorry I interrupted you. If you could just wrap up the point you were trying to make about Lieutenant General Buratai so that we can move on to other issues.
Okay, so before now, when the Buratai was in the saddle, he gave the impression that all they needed was funds to get ammunition and prosecute the war. Days after he was relieved of that position as Chief of Army Staff, he went to the National Assembly on a very undeserved ambassadorial screening and said it will take 20 more years before Nigeria can tackle the insurgency successfully. So what does that speak? It speaks to the fact that in the first place, there was a lot of deceit on his part because they kept on giving the impression that that was a war. Remember, the president, before he came in, said within 1 year he was going to tackle, in 6 months, he will bring back security into the country, he will tackle insurgents. 1 year after his tenure, they came back with a narrative where they said Boko Haram had been technically defeated. Now, all of these go to speak about the hypocrisy, the insincerity, the lack of transparency between even the president and commander-in-chief and his service chiefs. And Nigerians must rise as people who hold the most powerful office. I always say that the most powerful office in the land is the office of the citizen of the Federal Republic. We must come together, we must rally.
Yes, indeed. Now, I'd like you to address talk of inequity in the appeal court, if you can, briefly. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I like to particularly refer to what's going on in recent times, the controversy that has dogged the purported attempt to appoint justices to the Court of Appeal. Recently, there's been lists circulating, 2 sets of lists, the priority list of 20 and another list of 20 non-priority lists. Now, if you look at that list, you will find that, let me first say that the President Court of Appeal had conducted a proper screening exercise, set up a committee of our brother justices, and they had done a tremendously good job and came out with a very good work. However, as is required, after the PCA, the President Court of Appeal, had done that, what she would do is to transmit the list to the Federal Judicial Service Commission and the NJC. However, despite the good work she had done, where she made a very big blunder is the failure to make that list public ab initio. You would recall that recently, barely 2 weeks ago, the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court, in attempting to fill in 6 new vacant positions in the bench of the Federal High Court, decided to release a short list of 36 judges who should be screened, and whoever emerges among them, 6 of them will emerge. He brought it and made it public. We all have it in public domain. And as a result, Nigerians, people including lawyers, will be able to make input in terms of what they think in the character and the conduct of these people to ascend the office of judges of the Federal High Court. And if you look at the appointment of senior advocates of Nigeria, always the Legal Practitioners Privileges Committee will always publicize list of candidates. Publicize so that Nigerians, lawyers, clients will be able to make inputs as to attesting to your character, you being a person of integrity or otherwise. The essence of this, and this is global best practice, the essence of this is so as to be able to check the wrong people who have issues with character emerging as judges. Now, the President of Court of Appeal, having done a tremendously good job in terms of getting a list, failed to publicize this, and as a result, politicians hijacked this list, politicians and powerful people within the corridors of power, and as a result, this list has been tainted. However, let me point out that one, issue of equity or inequity. Now, in the North, for instance, you have 13. The list is 20 priority judges. 13 of the 20 goes to the North. Now, 13 goes to the North, and within that 13, there is a list of 13, and there is no Christian in that list. That speaks to a breach of the provision of Section 42 of the Constitution, which forbids discrimination on the basis of religion or even gender, because even in that list, there is no woman among the 13 from the North. It speaks volume. Then even the discrimination on the basis of ethnicity, as contained in Section 49, a list of 20, the Southeast only has one person on that list. And again, you appointed 3 Qadis, Sharia court judges. Now, when you do that, we already have a full complement, a full panel of Sharia law jurists on the bench of the Court of Appeal. What is the essence of appointing another full panel, 3 out of 20, whereas we need specialists in other fields, including even customary law? There is nobody from the customary court. The essence of the customary Court of Appeal is well emphasized for them to have that. And yet, the only woman who is on the customary Court of Appeal did not even emerge, and the customary court, the customary law is suffering at the level of the appeal court. So there is so much inequity. And unfortunately, because of pressure of political bigwigs and all, the President of the Court of Appeal, whom I respect so much, has succumbed to pressure, and she decided to issue a press release on a Sunday where she was trying to paper the crack. There is a major issue. In her hastily descending into the arena, she forgot some basic things. One, how can NJC, that is going about now wanting to ratify a list that has been doctored from the original list, will a member of the NJC is now on the list of justices of the Court of Appeal to be sworn in? How can you sit in judgment over your case? You cannot sit in the panel of NJC looking at the PCA's list, and yet you have an interest in becoming a justice of the Court of Appeal. All of these inequities point to one thing, and the hastiness of the President of the Court of Appeal was also manifest in the error she made when she sounded as though the Court of Appeal is a new court and there was an attempt to recruit new justices. The truth of the matter is that what you do is to, first of all, fill the vacant positions in order to make sure. For instance, there were people who had retired in some states. There were people who had died in other states from the bench of the Court of Appeal. What was the right thing to do was for the PCA to actually, first of all, fill the vacant positions. Then if you have slots to increase maybe the numbers of judges and justices on the bench of the Court of Appeal, then you will be expected at that point to now make it a more transparent arrangement. But this list as it is now has been totally whittled down, her beautiful effort has been messed up because she shrouded it in secrecy. Global best practice is that you bring a list, you publicize it, you give the Nigerian masses who pay your salaries the opportunity to make input by at least saying the way the SANs do it, that this person is of credibility or this person is not, so that the wrong people do not get on the bench.
Well, Lemmy, would like to thank you very much. It's unfortunate that something as simple as, straightforward as the appointment of appeal court justices has now become a matter for engagement and protest by the Christian Association of Nigeria, by ethnic groups, religious associations. But it's really a matter of concern. But I hope that, some of the issues you've been raised, the appropriate authorities will look into them. Maybe perhaps Justice Dongban Mensem publishing the list of the Court of Appeal itself, so that we'll know that there's been really transparency, as she claims. But thank you. That's all we'll be able to take. Thank you very much for joining us.